Enoch Burke has had some good news in the courts in the last day or two. The Court of Appeal has decided to grant him an injunction to prevent the appeal panel, as is currently constituted, from going ahead. Just to be clear, Enoch Burke was dismissed out of his job in Wilson's Hospital School, and as part of that process with the Department of Education and for its staff and teachers and so on, he's entitled obviously to appeal that decision, and he did appeal the decision. It goes to a three-person panel appeal panel. And one of the members of that panel was a man called Kieran Christie. And Kieran Christie is an ASTI member and officer. I think he could be secretary or deputy secretary, or holds some official position in any case. Enoch Burke objected to the presence of Kieran Christie on the appeals panel because he said that ASTI have a particular view about transgender issues and so forth, and have gone round to schools, advocating for transgender rights issues and so on and so forth. So Enoch Burke felt that he wouldn't get a fair hearing with the appeal panel with Kieran Christie on it. He sought an injunction from the High Court, and the High Court refused and said there was no bias and there was no appearance of bias. However, he then appealed that decision from the High Court to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal have now granted him his injunction and have agreed with him to not allow the appeal to go ahead with the panel as it's constituted at the moment. The Appeal Court, or the Court of Appeal, had some interesting things to say though about the case, and I want to just check, and this reporting is from the Irish Times. I want to just check what the judge had to say, because I thought it was quite unusual. Yes, the judge in making the decision, she said that judge prevented current panel from holding a hearing with a great deal of reluctance. So the teacher Enoch Burke has won his appeal over the composition of this disciplinary panel set up to hear his appeal against his dismissal. He claimed that Kieran Christie, a member of the three-person appeals panel who was the General Secretary of ASTI, was a promoter of transgenderism. The appeals panel denied his claim, and the Court of Appeal, or rather the High Court, agreed and said that there was no bias. However, Miss Justice Mary Faherty, on behalf of the three-judge Court of Appeal, said, quote, with a great deal of reluctance, she would grant an injunction to Mr. Burke, restraining the appeals panel as presently constituted from hearing the respondents from holding a hearing. So, as it's presently constituted, it won't go ahead, but obviously they're going to reconstitute the panel. He was dismissed in 2023. He sought an appeal through the normal employment process, but then brought a High Court challenge, claiming that appeals panel member Mr. Christie was, quote, an activist for transgenderism within the ASTI and was personally or objectively biased. In December 2023, then, the High Court rejected his challenge, saying that Mr. Burke had not discharged the burden on him of establishing that there was a fair question to be tried of a reasonable apprehension of bias. He appealed to the Court of Appeal, and the disciplinary panel, opposed that appeal. On Friday, Miss Justice Faherty for the Court of Appeal said that while accepting Mr. Christie does not sit on the appeals panel in his capacity as General Secretary of the ASTI, it must nevertheless be the case that Mr. Christie's role in the ASTI, which has advised schools to use a transitioning student's preferred choice of pronoun, would be influential to the reasonable independent observer. In those circumstances, she could not agree with the High Court judge that there was not a fair question to be tried in relation to any issue of which it was claimed the ASTI had taken a position. She rejected Mr. Burke's suggestion that if his objection to Mr. Christie was well-founded, the objection must similarly be well-founded in relation to any other person nominated by the ASTI. She rejected that suggestion. I'm surprised at that, because obviously Kieran Christie, anybody who's going to replace him from ASTI, you would imagine would have the same view as the ASTI, the organisation. And let's face it, the only reason that a particular member is on this appeal panel is because of the membership of the ASTI and the position that they hold there. They're not just pulling random people in, they're pulling in people from the ASTI, because the ASTI is obviously secondary school teachers. union. The judge said there remained question as to whether Mr. Burke, with his history of contempt of court, quote, gets to pick and choose how and when he gets to invoke the court's protection and jurisdiction. Mr. Burke has, apart from spending more than 500 days in prison over a number of periods, was also the subject of daily €700 and later €1,400 fines for every time he turned up at the school, and the High Court recently made orders permitting the seizure of money to pay the fines from the bank account into which his school salary continued to be paid pending the Court of Appeal decision. Miss Justice Faherty said she considered his contempt no less egregious now than when he was before the High Court challenging the appeals panel. However, the distinguishing feature of the present case was the spectre of unfairness that will hover over the disciplinary appeal process if he has to face that body as presently constituted, given that he has made out a case of a reasonable apprehension of objective bias, she said. While it was normal for the loser in a case to pay the winner's costs, the court was not in normal territory here. The judge said that there would be no cost order in Mr. Burke's favour, save an order setting aside the costs order made against him in the High Court. So he's been successful in the Court of Appeal in having Kieran Christie removed from the appeals panel. Obviously this appeals panel will be reconstituted and somebody else will be stepping in instead of Kieran Christie, and the appeal then presumably against his termination, his dismissal, can go ahead. He's not getting his costs, no order has been made as to his costs, and the judge did make reference to his being in contempt of court repeatedly. So that's it, some success for Enoch Burke there. The next step now will be to persuade the appeals panel, when the appeal does go ahead, that he was actually unfairly dismissed. Hope you find the video useful. I'm in Clogher. This is Clogher Church there behind me. Just in here. Yeah, that's Clogher Church.